A grieving woman goes with her friends to a caving expedition when it goes horribly wrong, struggling to survive against a strange breed of bloodthirsty predators. The movie begins with a group of friends whitewater rafting together. After the rafting, Sarah went back straight to the hotel with her husband, Paul, and daughter, Jessica, while her friends, Juno and Beth, stayed behind to clean up. On their way to the hotel, Sarah noticed that Paul seemed a bit distant and asked him what was wrong. Paul took his eyes away from the road to reply to her question, and he unknowingly drove the car to the opposite lane, resulting in a crash against the car heading in the opposite direction. This accident took the lives of Paul and Jessica, leaving Sarah to grieve over her family. A year later, Sarah has fully recovered and decided to join her friends in their adventure. Together with Beth, they traveled to Chattooga National Park and parked their cars in front of the cabin where the others already were. Sarah entered the cabin and happily greeted their two other friends, Rebecca and Sam. Sarah was also introduced to Holly, the new addition to their circle of friends. The 6 friends enjoyed their day together in the cabin before going to sleep that night. Sarah, on the other hand, was still awake. She heard the sound of an eagle outside and stood by the window. Suddenly, a sharp metal broke through the window and pierced Sarah's head, much exactly like what happened to her husband in the accident, and Sarah gasped awake, only calming down when she realized it was just another nightmare. The group then started preparing and headed to Borum Caves. As they were nearing the caves, they noticed a large dead reindeer on the ground and checked it, guessing that it was probably a bear or a Bigfoot who killed the reindeer. The entrance of the Borum Caves is a huge opening on the ground, and they have to rappel down to get inside. Once they were inside, they looked around the cave when a horde of bats suddenly flew out of the dark, scaring Sarah, who was the closest to where the bats came from. Sarah, still sensitive and traumatized due to the accident, kept on screaming in fear even when the bats had flown away, and Juno had to help her calm down. Then they began exploring the caves. They crawled through narrow gaps in the caves, and Sarah began panicking due to how tight the spaces were. Beth saw what was happening to Sarah and crawled towards her, comforting her and assuring her that everything was all right and that the cave was safe. Sarah listened to Beth and continued crawling again. But then the caves collapsed and Sarah lost consciousness. She was woken up and noticed that they were trapped in a chamber. They talked about the entrances and exits of the caves written on the guidebook. But when Sam asked Juno for confirmation, telling her to check the book, they were only met with disappointment when Juno told them she had left the book behind. Not knowing what to do or where to go at that point, the group gradually became agitated and started arguing. Sam asked Juno where they were, knowing that Juno is the one who knows a lot about caves. But Juno admitted that even though she didn't know where they were, she had led them deeper into the caves, knowing that these parts of the caves were unnamed and that she wanted them to be the ones to name them after they explored the caves. Beth confronted Juno, berating her for selfishly deciding on bringing them somewhere they had no idea of and only adding to Sarah's worries as the latter was still not fully recovered mentally and emotionally from the accident. Juno destroyed a part of the chamber wall to make a hole, and they crawled through it. But then they stumbled upon another obstacle. They found a pit that was too high for them to go down to, so one of them would need to get all the way across to rig a line for the rest of the group. Rebecca asked for the other rope bag they had, but Beth informed her that they lost it during the collapse, so they had no choice but to make do with the remaining rope and cams they had. Rebecca was the first to go, and she rigged a line for the others to easily get across. Juno was the last to go, and she gathered the rope again to make sure they would still have something to use later on. She retrieved the cams on her way, but one wrong move almost caused her to fall to her death, and Rebecca, who was holding the rope for her, wounded her hand. The others helped Juno up, and the latter showed them a random piton she got when she retrieved one of their cams. Beth was hopeful as she guessed that someone might have explored the cave first before they did, and that means there could be an exit somewhere. But Juno explained that the piton was at least 100 years old, and if there really was someone who had explored the cave first before they did, that someone would have named the cave already. The group continued on their way with Holly in the lead. Then they found etchings on the wall, and when Juno lit a flare, they realized that the etchings were the mountain, the cave, and 2 entrances to said cave. It means that there was another way out, and the group, finally glad again that they might be able to get out after all, hurried on looking for the exit. Unbeknownst to the group, someone was lurking and silently stalking them. Juno found another narrow gap, and Holly, determined to finally leave the place, went ahead first. Juno warned her to slow down and to be careful, but Holly saw a light coming from ahead. Assuming that it was daylight, she excitedly ran to where the light was coming from, with Juno running after her, yelling at her that it wasn't daylight. It was already too late, as Holly had slipped into a hole and injured her leg. The others went down to get her. While they were aiding Holly, Sarah, who was gathering the rope, heard what seemed like a child giggling behind her and went to check what it was. That's when Sarah found what she assumed was an odd-looking man fiddling with something. The man looked at him and ran away. When Sarah turned around to get back to others, she yelled in surprise to find Juno standing so close behind her. She told Juno what she saw, but Juno didn't believe her, thinking that it was just the dark playing tricks on Sarah. They went back to the others and Sarah insisted that she really did see a man. She admitted that she had already seen someone before but wasn't sure what it was. But now that she saw a man for the second time, Sarah was sure that someone else was in there with them. Sarah wanted to look for the man and ask for help, but the others declined as they needed to focus on getting Holly out of the place, and their time is just going to be wasted if they look for the man Sarah saw. They went back to looking for a way out, albeit slowly now that Holly is injured, when they found a pile of animal bones on the ground, letting them know that this part of the cave is the lair of some predators. Scared, Rebecca started screaming for help. Sarah, who had an infrared camera, pointed the object at Beth and found a human-shaped creature standing behind her. Sarah and Beth screamed, and when they opened all their lights, the creature ran into hiding. They frantically looked for the creature, and Juno lit a flare, demanding everyone to keep on moving, only to stop in her tracks when they heard an inhumane screech. They gathered around in alarm when they realized that the creature was stalking them. Sarah found a way and they tried to move as fast as possible while still carrying Holly, but the creature showed up, snarling at them. The fear caused more panic in everyone, and they ran in different directions, leaving Holly and Juno behind. The creature grabbed Holly and bit her jugular, instantly killing her. Enraged and scared, Juno fought against the creature and brutally killed it while another creature dragged Holly away from them. She was still on high alert when she felt a presence behind her. She turned around, hastily stabbing whoever was behind her, and was terrified when she realized that it was Beth. Beth fell on the ground, begging Juno not to leave her, but the other girl just looked away in guilt before slowly leaving her behind. Meanwhile, Rebecca and Sam were looking for a way out together when they sensed the creature following them. They laid in the dark and stayed quiet as they let the creature pass by. Unexpectedly, Sam's watch started beeping loudly, and she hurriedly took it off, throwing it away to let the creature follow the sound. They realized that the creature was blind and was only hunting using its ears. They heard Juno calling for them and watched as the creature followed her voice. The two of them then continued on their way, but another creature appeared, attacking them. Rebecca told Sam to run as she tried to fight against the creature. Fortunately, Juno came and killed the creature. She told Rebecca and Sam that the creature had taken Holly and killed Beth. She informed them that she found markings on the wall. She explained that whoever left that climbing gear they found marked their routes, and now that she's found those marks, she finally has an idea where the way out is. But Juno refused to leave without Sarah, and the trio began their search for their friend. Sarah, on the other hand, was silent as she walked through the dark, using a camcorder to see the way and to avoid attracting the creature's attention. She fell down in shock when Holly got dropped in front of her, and she watched in fear as the creatures feasted on her dead friend. Once the creatures were done, Sarah hurriedly left the area to look for the others. That's when she found a bloody Beth laying on the ground, weakly calling out for her name. Beth told her that it was Juno who did it to her and who left her behind to die. She then handed Sarah Juno's keychain, admitting that Juno had been cheating with Sarah's late husband. Sarah was shocked at the information but decided to ignore it to focus on Beth. But the latter knew she wouldn't last any longer, and her only request was for Sarah to not leave her in pain. Sarah was brokenhearted, but she gave Beth what she wished for. She comforted Beth and whispered for her to close her eyes. Then she grabbed a rock, crying as she ended her best friend's suffering. She stared at Beth for a while when the creature jumped on her back, trying to bite into her jugular. But Sarah was in no mood to deal with it, and with all the anger and strength she had, she killed the creature. She watched as a female creature approached the dead male, whimpering. It then chased Sarah through a bloody puddle, and Sarah killed it before it could bite her. She laid down on a rock and stayed still when she heard another one approaching. She waited for the creature to turn its back on her before grabbing a bone and killing it. Sarah looked dead. She stared at the dead creature before screaming in both anger and agony. Meanwhile, the other three were chased by a horde of creatures. A scared Sam used a rope to get across the pit and get back to the chamber where they first came from, while Juno and Rebecca tried to convince her to turn back. A creature then appeared, crawling towards Sam, who pulled out a knife in an attempt to fight the creature. The creature's claw had slit Sam's throat, but Sam willed herself to kill the creature before she died, and she successfully did so. Juno and Rebecca were crying for Sam when a creature grabbed Rebecca by the leg. The creature then started biting into Rebecca's stomach as the latter screamed in pain. Juno just watched for a while before jumping down the pit, not even bothering to help her friend, who was still alive. She fell into the water and was attacked by another creature. Juno killed it before climbing up. She found a hollow opening and moved towards it when she slipped. But before she could fall, a bloody Sarah grabbed her. Juno was weirded out when she saw Sarah's appearance, as it looked like the girl had already gone mad. Sarah interrogated Juno, asking her where the others were. Juno replied that none of them made it, not even Beth. And when Sarah asked if she saw Beth die, she knew Juno was lying when the latter nodded yes. The two of them were then attacked by a horde and they bravely fought against them. Sarah, seemingly having lost her mind already, bit one creature and dug her fingers into its eyes. Sarah and Juno faced each other once they were done dealing with the horde when they heard the sound of another horde approaching. Sarah, who was holding a sharp bone, injured Juno's leg with it and ran away, leaving Juno to die. Sarah just kept on running when she slid down a slope. She was losing her consciousness when she noticed a light coming from ahead of her, and when she looked up, she found her way out. She crawled her way out of the caves, coming out from underneath a tree, and ran back to the car. She got inside the car and drove away, only to stop by the side road to take a breather. Sarah opened the window to vomit and rested her back on the car seat, only to scream when she saw the ghost of Juno staring at her from the passenger seat. Then Sarah woke up. She realized that she never got out of the cave and the creatures were approaching. Sarah heard a whisper and saw her daughter sitting in front of a birthday cake. It was just a hallucination, but Sarah still smiled as she stared at her daughter, accepting her fate.